China has embarked on the most rapid nuclear arsenal build-up in history. Russia is sending a clear message. Is ambiguity something that gives us confidence that the future is safe? In Ukraine, there's a secret dimension of the war that is not talked about. It lurks in the shadows, silent, continually on call, and ready for the ultimate strike. Welcome to Battle Plans Exposed. I'm Philip Ingram, and now in an age of renewed geopolitical tensions, the language of power is once again being spoken with a chilling and radioactive undertone. Every time Putin feels cornered and wants to threaten, he, or more usually his henchmen Medvedev or Lavrov or Peskov, rattle the nuclear sabre. The spectre of nuclear conflict, a ghost we believed was confined to the history books, now haunts the corridors of international diplomacy. Today, we expose the battle plans, the arsenals, and the doctrines that hold the world in a fragile balance. We'll ask the hard questions. Is Russia truly a world power? Or has the Ukraine war exposed them as a paper tiger? Is Donald Trump correct in warning Zelensky that Russia will destroy Ukraine? And how is China's quiet but massive nuclear build-up fundamentally changing the geopolitical stage? First, let's look at Russia. Its true strength is central to the nuclear threat. The world once feared the Russian army, a descendant of the Soviet war machine. But nearly 4 years since the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, that has exposed the Russian military establishment as a paper tiger. A force that looks fearsome on paper, but lacks the operational teeth. We've seen catastrophic corruption, poor logistics, a lack of command, wave after wave of suicidal assaults and sporadic skirmishes that are no match to Ukraine's defensive tactics and fluid organisation. This conventional failure from Russia is a dangerous paradox. The more their army is blunted on the ground, the louder they make nuclear threats to maintain great power status. Their weakness is the world's danger, and that danger is huge. Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal, over 5,500 warheads. Around 1,700 of those are strategic weapons, deployed and ready to launch from land-based silos, from submarines that are operating in the oceans, and from long-range bombers patrolling the skies. This colossal force is Russia's insurance policy, the legacy of a superpower and the bedrock of its current military strategy. It's the reason Putin can act with impunity on the world stage. But to understand the leverage this gives Putin, we need to quickly establish the history and terrifying mechanics of these weapons, but also uncover some of the mistruths around them. The story begins in the deserts of New Mexico in the United States. The US-led Oppenheimer project harnessed the power of the atom, culminating in the first atomic bomb. In August 1945, the world witnessed its horrifying capability. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan were razed, and the nuclear age began, written in fire and shadows. The end of World War II did not bring peace, but a new, colder kind of conflict. The US and the Soviet Union embarked on a frantic nuclear arms race. Both sides built thousands of weapons, adhering to the grim doctrine known as mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The logic was simple. If either side launched an attack, the other would retaliate, ensuring that the annihilation of both occurred. In terms of the weapons themselves, they fall into three terrifying categories. First, there are the tactical nuclear weapons, like we have here with the Russian SS-26, a range of up to 500 kilometers. These are smaller, lower yield warheads designed for battlefield use. With a shorter range, they're intended to destroy specific military targets. An armoured formation, a command centre, but the line between tactical strike and all-out nuclear war is a dangerously blurry one. The next, and this is a Chinese version, and it's the Chinese DF-26, the intermediate range nuclear missile. That's got a range of between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. 5,500 kilometers is a long distance. These weapons can travel thousands of kilometers, capable of striking targets across continents. Their existence was so destabilizing that a landmark treaty was signed to ban them, a treaty that has since collapsed. Finally, the apex predators of the nuclear world, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. Here, the Russian SS-29, or it could be an SS-27 too. Please let me know what you think it is, but this was at the recent Victory Day parade in Moscow. Launched from deep within a country's territory, they can reach almost any point in the globe within 30 minutes maximum. Carrying multiple independently targetable warheads, a single ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, can obliterate several cities at once. They're the ultimate deterrent, the endgame weapon. Critical to understanding of these nuclear weapons is the effect that they have on the ground. The tactical nuclear missile. They're not part of the strategic proliferation treaties that have been signed because they're tactical. The numbers of warheads are not controlled in the same way, but they're there to have a tactical effect. The blast radius is about 1 kilometer. The radius of further effects is 2 to 3 to 5 kilometers. On the front lines of Ukraine, where the front line is up to 1,000 kilometers long, that's not going to have a massive military effect. And therefore, its tactical use is not going to have a tactical effect on the battlefield. Its automatic use does not mean that we then escalate to strategic. This may be described as a tactical weapon, but any use will have a strategic effect. But the strategic nuclear missiles are the ones that will have lead to much wider destruction. These are the missiles with the intermediate range missiles that are controlled by international treaty, or used to be controlled by international treaty. These are the ones that are the game changers, the country destroyers, because the warheads are orders of magnitude larger than we saw destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the Second World War. Their power is frightening. It's when these beasts start getting flown around that we're into the end of the world scenario. When these beasts are flown around, it's a different game. But the strategic impact of the use of a nuclear missile or a nuclear warhead cannot be underestimated. It may be tactical, it has a strategic effect. It is strategic, it has an end of world effect. This is the history and machinery that hangs over the Ukraine conflict. Now let's address the two central threats emerging from this chaos: the destruction of Ukraine and the global nuclear game change driven by China. On the political stage, Donald Trump reportedly warned President Zelensky that Ukraine will be destroyed if he doesn't agree to peace terms. This led to a shouting match over territorial concessions. Is this just political bluster, or is it a grim military truth? It's a reality check. When Russia's conventional army fails to conquer, their alternative is systematic destruction. This doesn't necessarily mean a nuclear strike. Putin knows the political damage of launching just one of Russia's nuclear warheads is a global and strategic effect. It will turn China, a tacit supporter of Russia, against Russia. It will turn India, a buyer of Russian oil, against Russia. Russia will become increasingly isolated. That is where the strategic impact of even the use of a tactical warhead will impact Russia more than it'll impact the battlefield. As such, the annihilation of Ukraine's infrastructure is carried out using conventional, long-range missiles and drones. This is why the fight over Tomahawk missiles is so crucial. When the Belarus leader Lukashenko warns that they could lead to nuclear war, and the Russian spokesman Peskov claims that they could carry a dirty bomb, they're trying to raise the stakes. The truth is, Russia cannot defeat Ukraine's army, but it can destroy Ukraine's capacity to function as a state. If Western aid, especially air defence, falters, that is more likely. Trump's warning highlights Ukraine's one critical military vulnerability. But why is Ukraine in this precarious position, relying on others for air defence? To answer that, we must understand the promise that was not just broken, but was shattered. Winding back the clock to the aftermath of the Soviet collapse in 1991, Ukraine, newly independent, found itself the third largest nuclear power in the world, inheriting a vast arsenal from its Soviet past. That arsenal was created by Ukrainian engineers who supplied the Soviet Union the understanding of what was going on. Many of the nuclear reactors we see in Ukraine today were designed as nuclear missile material manufacturing plants and power plants secondary, the same as many Russian nuclear reactors. In 1994, with the signing of the Budapest Memorandum, a landmark agreement, Ukraine committed to relinquishing its entire nuclear arsenal. In return, the United States, the United Kingdom, and critically, the Russian Federation pledged to respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and existing borders. It was hailed as a victory for non-proliferation, a promise that security did not require the ultimate weapon. But that promise would later be shattered by Vladimir Putin's invasion. The very security guarantees that secured the denuclearization of Ukraine were rendered worthless. This is the foundation of the current crisis and a terrifying lesson for every non-nuclear state watching this war unfold. And that lesson is nuclear proliferation. And that is what's scaring many of the nuclear-powered countries at the moment. While the world is fixed on the war in Ukraine, a new, far more consequential dynamic on the nuclear stage has emerged: China. As Ukraine hammers Russia's critical energy market that funds Putin's war, Russia has turned to China for financial help. But the real geopolitical shift is happening in the silos and the shipyards. China has embarked on the most rapid, opaque nuclear arsenal build-up in history. This isn't just a numbers game, it's a new strategic goal. For decades, Beijing maintained a doctrine of minimum deterrence, a small, survivable arsenal only large enough to retaliate after a first strike. That is gone. China has developed its nuclear arsenal program at an extraordinary rate, the most rapid build-up in nuclear history. It's on track to have over 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. President Xi is building a comprehensive nuclear triad, land, sea, and air, that can hold the US mainland and all of American bases in the Asia Pacific, including Guam, within its range. And we often look at the world from a different perspective, but when we look at it staring down at the North Pole, we can see the distances and how they're much smaller than we think of as we go round the outside of the world. China's secretive rocket force is rapidly expanding and has test launched more ballistic missiles than the rest of the world combined. With bases located in strategic positions across China, the People's Liberation Army nuclear deterrence program has targets across the Korean Peninsula, Japan, Taiwan, and the US mainland. Massive new silo fields which hold and launch intercontinental ballistic missiles have been built in the north of China. Guess where they're targeting? In a giant game of nuclear whack-a-mole, ICBMs are moved from silo to silo. This shell game is to keep the US guessing as to which silos are active. Crucial information when deciding a preemptive or a retaliatory strike. So why is this important? The simplest answer is Taiwan. This arsenal is intended to act as a nuclear shield, a high-end deterrent intended to prevent the US from intervening in a contingency over the island. It forces the US to divert resources to contain two nuclear pairs simultaneously. China's nuclear rise erodes the confidence of key US allies like Japan and South Korea, and it is a true long-game shift in global power. But this military competition is only one half of the equation. Simultaneously, the US, under President Trump, is waging an economic war in China, eroding its power with tariffs and targeting the heart of China's strength, global trade. And look at the consequences for Moscow. As Putin aligns closer to China, its own superpower status is being visibly reduced, both economically and militarily. China is the rising strategic power, and Russia the fading, unpredictable partner. They were never good bedfellows. The history between China and Russia is not one of them coming together and working together. It's all, from each perspective, what's in it for me. China's pursuit of nuclear strength is fundamentally altering the strategic balance that has kept peace for decades. We're now in a three-way standoff, and the balance of terror has never been so complicated. So to fully grasp the danger, we must understand the machinery of global annihilation. The world's top nuclear powers, the United States, China, and Russia, rely on a strategy known as the nuclear triad. This means their arsenal is launched from 3 distinct platforms. Manned bombers, for example in the United States, the B-2 bomber and the B-52. These are flexible in terms of their armaments, deployments, and have non-nuclear roles as well. Long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, as we have seen. These are kept far from the enemy and are highly accurate, and therefore make a first strike attack require a huge amount of investment to contemplate. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs, are the intercontinental version, but on a submarine. America, Russia, the UK, France, and China keep nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed deterrent submarines continuously at sea, operating in all of the oceans and seas around the world. The frightening thing about the hidden nuclear submarines is nobody knows where they are, and they could be only a few hundred or 1,000 kilometers off the US coast, or our submarines could be just off the Russian coast. For the near term at least, these are capable of being kept completely hidden from attack, and thus are a guaranteed second strike capability. The combination of these 3 nuclear launch platforms is key. It keeps the enemies from thinking they could get away with a nuclear attack. Even if they manage to take out one part of the triad, there will always be an option out there to strike back. But how is the launch authorized? The rules governing the end of the world are very different in Moscow, Washington, and Beijing. I'll start with Beijing. They're very opaque. We don't quite know who's got the authority, but you can guarantee it sits with Xi Jinping. Whether he has delegated that to any others within his regime, we wait to find out. In the United States, the system is designed for speed and rests with a single individual, the president. Why is it speed? Because if there's a Russian nuclear submarine with submarine-launched ballistic missiles sitting not far off the US coast, from launch to explosion can be less than 20 minutes. In American terms, the launch is called the sole authority. The president has the nuclear football and authenticates the order with codes kept in something known as the biscuit. It's known as the biscuit because it snaps like a biscuit to open it up and get access to the codes. Critically, no other person has the legal right to veto this command. It is designed for rapid civilian control. In Russia, the release authority is centralized with the president, but it is built with an extra layer of high-level military verification. The system relies on the Cheget, Russia's nuclear briefcase, which is connected to the Kazbek command and control network. 3 of these exist, one with the president, one with the Minister of Defense, and one with the Chief of the General Staff. The launch requires a signal confirmation from those other briefcase holders to authenticate the order before it goes to the silos and the submarines. In the UK and France, the release rules are slightly more opaque, resting with the Prime Minister and the President. For Britain's independent deterrent, the final instruction is contained in a letter of last resort, signed by the Prime Minister and locked in a safe on the nuclear-armed submarines. Remember, UK's nuclear-armed submarines are not designed for first strike. They're only used for a retaliatory strike. And when they get the signal, if they get the signal or the indication that they should go to nuclear launch, that is when the safe is opened and the captain of the deterrent submarine reads the letter giving instructions from the Prime Minister. Now let's address the most feared weapon in the Ukraine context, the tactical nuclear weapon. Physical damage from a tactical nuclear weapon is limited. But here is the critical point. From Putin's perspective, a single use would have little tactical effect in Ukraine because the front line is massive. However, from a political perspective, there's no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon. The physical damage may be contained, but the political damage, the global impact, is strategic. Putin knows this, which is one reason why I believe he will never use one. Western intelligence watches this very closely. The proliferation of nuclear weapons, the readiness of nuclear forces around the world is the top, or one of the top, intelligence priorities. Western intelligence has seen no change in the status of Russian nuclear forces, no matter when or what Putin or his henchmen have said. The threats are a tool of intimidation, part of the information war. The sheer terror of these weapons forced the world's superpowers to the negotiating table. The Cold War saw the birth of arms control, the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT. In the 1970s, they were the first attempt to put a cap on the burgeoning arsenals at that strategic and intercontinental range. This was followed by the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaties, START 1 and START 2, which went further, not just limiting, but actively reducing the number of deployed warheads. The most recent of these, New START, was signed only in 2010, and it limited the US and Russia to 1,550 deployed strategic warheads each. Why deployed? Because nuclear warheads need replaced, and it didn't count those that were being developed or stored for destruction. Destruction plans hadn't been matured at that stage. But with Russia's suspension of the treaty and its impending expiration, the world is facing the terrifying prospect of an era with no limits on the deadliest weapons ever created. The world came perilously close to that reality during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 and the 13-day standoff that pushed humanity to the very brink of extinction. But the brink was reached again in a less well-known but equally terrifying crisis in 1983, when tensions were at fever pitch. US President Ronald Reagan had announced his ambitious Strategic Defense Initiative, dubbed Star Wars, a plan to build a shield against Soviet missiles. The Kremlin, led by an ailing and deeply paranoid Yuri Andropov, saw this not as defense, but as a precursor to US first strike. Today, that Cold War echo is back, louder and more dangerous. Russia's current nuclear posture is one of calculated ambiguity. It is official doctrine, updated as recently as late 2024, and that states that nuclear weapons could be used in response to a conventional attack that poses a critical threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Russia or its allies. But what defines critical threat? The answer remains deliberately vague. Since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Russian officials, up to and including Vladimir Putin, have repeatedly and publicly reminded the world of their nuclear might. These statements are a clear attempt to deter Western support for Ukraine, a strategy of nuclear intimidation, coupled with the deployment of new hypersonic missiles designed to evade defences and the stationing of tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. Russia is sending a clear message. Its nuclear arsenal is not a relic, but a central tool of its statecraft. From the broken promises of Budapest to the chilling doctrines of today, Russia's nuclear threats have reshaped the landscape of global security. The treaties that once provided a buffer are frayed and gone. The rhetoric of mutually assured destruction has returned. As the world navigates this new and perilous era, the lessons from history, from Hiroshima to the near miss in 1983, have never been more vital. The battle plans have been exposed, and the stakes could not be higher. What are these three elements? Russia's paper tiger army, the constant threat of destruction in Ukraine, and China's silent nuclear arsenal tell us about the world's battle plans. They tell us that the nuclear threat is no longer a Cold War relic. It is a terrifying, active component of 21st century warfare. Russia's conventional failure is making its nuclear threats more credible and forcing the world to live under the shadow of its unpredictable doctrine and its unpredictable leadership. Trump's warning holds a military truth. The ultimate destruction of Ukraine is a possibility if Western resolve fails. And China's pursuit of nuclear parity is the true long game shift, fundamentally altering the strategic balance that has kept the peace for decades. Global stability is not guaranteed by a balance of power, but by a delicate balance of terror. And that balance is shifting faster than ever before. Mutually assured destruction, ambiguity, and our nuclear program or our nuclear response is based on strategic ambiguity. The Russians, the Chinese, not even the President of the United States knows what's in that letter from the Prime Minister to our nuclear submarine captains. Is ambiguity something that gives us confidence that the future is safe? Join me next time for more in-depth analysis on the Sun's battle plans exposed. Thank you.